Alright, what's happening, my mathletes? That's right, Miss Muscarella coming at you. And in this video, we're going to take a look at the circular trig functions to figure out where sine and cosine and tangent, secant, cosecant, cotangent, where those 6 trig functions are positive. Now, when we do that, we're going to be taking a look at a point, some point x, y, and that's going to be where we're going to make a reference triangle. So that is going to end up looking something like this, and we saw this a little bit from the previous example. Maybe our triangle is here in quadrant number 1, if our point is in that area. But maybe we've got a point down here in quadrant number 2, and so the sign of x's and y's, they're going to vary depending on which quadrant that is in. Because if our triangle were in quadrant number 1, that y value, of course, would be positive. But here, we know if it were in quadrant 4, then that would be negative. All right, more on that in a little bit. So x's and y's, the signs can change. However, the r value, and I want to make sure you write this down. The r is always positive. All right, so the r value is always going to be positive. So with that said, let's kind of take a look at generically where our x's and y's are positive and negative, depending on which quadrant we're in. Now, if we're in quadrant number 1, so let's go ahead and take a look at this. If we're in quadrant number 1, we know our x is positive and our y is positive. And if we're in quadrant number 2, so say we had a point over here like negative 4, 5, something like that, we know the x value is negative and the y value is positive. So we know that. And then if we were down in quadrant number 3, both the x and the y, both of those would have to be negative. For example, if we had the point negative 4, negative 5, right? We know both of those x's and y values are negative. And then if we were in quadrant number 4, the x value, so say we had a point here like positive 4, negative 5. We know that point would be somewhere here in quadrant number 4. And that would, of course, have a positive x value and a negative y value. So that's the general idea behind that. Then when we analyze this, we're going to take a look at, because we know the r is always going to be positive, so we're going to kind of ignore that. So we're going to just focus on the x's and the y's. So if I look at the sine function, that has a y in it, as does cosecant. So I'm going to take a look at those two first. And I want to know, where is the y value positive? And if I know my coordinate points, the y is the second number. And that's going to be positive in quadrant number 1 and positive over here in quadrant number 2. So with that said, so now I'm going to write the word sine down here. So sine is going to be positive in quadrant number 2 as well as in quadrant number 1. Now similarly, its reciprocal function, the reciprocal function for sine is cosecant. And if I have a positive number divided by another positive number, positive divided by positive is positive. So the cosecant will be positive as well. So its reciprocal function, cosecant, will also be positive in the same quadrants. So that's for the very first one. Sine is going to work with the y value. Now cosine, cosine is we're going to take a look at the x value here for cosine. And cosine, when I look at that, I want to say, where are the x values positive? And that would be here in quadrant number 1, as well as down here in quadrant number 4. And I can see that like with my little sample point right here. And if I would have had a point here, say 4 or 5, somewhere up there in that quadrant, we know both the x and the y are positive. All right, so cosine is going to be positive in quadrant number 1 also, as well as all the way down here in quadrant number 4. Now, similarly, cosine's reciprocal function, secant, is also going to be positive in those same quadrants. So secant would also be positive there. So come on, technology, there we go. So secant would also be positive in those same 2 spots. And then lastly, we got the tangent. Now the tangent is going to depend. It's going to depend because the ratio of the y value and the x value, sometimes the y's are positive, sometimes they're negative. So let's kind of take a look at this. We want them both to be positive. So if I have a positive divided by a positive, okay, so if my y value is positive and my x value is positive, so that's like in quadrant number 1. If both of those, I know my answer is going to be positive. And that occurs, so in quadrant number 1. So if I had the coordinates 4 or 5, all right, so if we look at that, if I had 5 for my y and 4 for my x, 5 for Muskie's birth, yay! So cool for that, yes. May the 4th be with you too. So if I have 5 over 4, we know that ratio is going to be positive. So that tells me tangent is positive in quadrant 1 as well. Similarly, cotangent is going to be also positive in the same quadrant. Now, what if I had 2 negatives though? So say I had negative 5 over negative 4. So if I had negative 5 over negative 4, now I would still have a ratio that ends up giving me a positive value. So negative 5 over 4 is a positive ratio. So that means tangent is also going to be positive right here in quadrant number 3, as well as cotangent. So those are the 4 quadrants and how the 6 trig functions play into there. So those are the 6 trig functions and where they are positive as they relate to the 4 quadrants. Now, along with that, you do have to, a lot of times you'll hear math teachers talk about this acronym, and I know I will too. We'll do ASTC. So A just stands for all, and then the S stands for sine. So these are just going to deal with the big 3, sine, cosine, tangent. T stands for tangent, and C stands for cosine. All right, so there will be an acronym that a lot of people will say, something along these lines. All students, now being a math teacher, we'll probably say calc, even though we know that's not true. Maybe say all students take chem instead of calc. So, no, I'm not taking calc, I'm going to take chem. Whatever it is, come up with some mnemonic that is going to work for you. So the A, the S, the T, and then the C, so they're going to be what is positive in each quadrant, along with the reciprocal functions, but we don't have one for that. So that is it on this one. Come on back and we'll see these in action here, not so much for 1 clue, but definitely for 2 clues. All right, thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you later. Peace out.